We have a debate between Don Lemon and Candace Owens to look at, Candace Owens being the far-right podcaster who recently declared she was leaving the cult of science. If that can put into any perspective where she is coming from here, and she absolutely gets shut down by Don Lemon on a multitude of points here, so I wanted to go over just a couple of them that I thought were the best ones to drive home.
Listen, I believe in free speech, right? But I also believe that free speech comes with consequences. So the word you said was right? Is that exactly the word? So what did you mean by that? You think it's okay to say the word, to call people to their face?
No, actually, I said words have meaning. And so when you start allowing the perverts to dictate speech, then words just have to go away. And as I said in that clip, when I was growing up and I was reading English novels, when people say you're walking through the woods to get it meant a bundle of sticks. And then they said you can no longer say this word that has a real meaning, right? A bundle of sticks, because some pervert took that and threw it as an epithet towards gay people. I think that's actually, that's a wrong way of thinking, because then what you're doing is you're allowing perverts to dictate society. So I don't like the death of the English language because people are getting offended. So that's like, I could pick any word. I could say, plant. And from now on, every time I see a gay guy, I'm gonna be like, he's a total plant. And then eventually they say you can't say plant anymore. It's like, no, this is a real word that has meaning. Attack the person who's perverting the word, but you don't suddenly disappear a word and you say you can no longer say it, or you can no longer read these Virginia Woolf novels because the word has been perverted. I think that's a backwards way of thinking.
Read Virginia Woolf novels, and the only people I know who are trying to ban books, Virginia Woolf. And other books that even say the N-word. I mean, it's conservatives.
And it took him one sentence to instantly back her into a logic corner. I swear it's so easy with these far right-wing types. Now, first off, just to say, of course, free speech has limits. I love how right-wingers try to weaponize these things like free speech to be like, well, I should just be able to be racist and say whatever I want, when it doesn't mean you're in any way free from the consequence of your words. You can't run into an airport and yell bomb. I would say that most people would agree with the fact that if you do this, you should be reprimanded in one way or the other. You can't walk into a police station and say a crime is happening that is not happening, or report that at a real crime and say you're the police when you're not. Republicans, however, as of recent, have tried to use this to say, well, we should be allowed to be racist or homophobic because freedom of speech. When minority groups are protected in America, you can say homophobic slurs if you want. You can say racist things if you want. That is your freedom of speech. You have the freedom to do so, but then your job would have the freedom to not want to associate with you after. They're just as free as you are, and that's not cancel culture. That is the consequence of your actions. If you do something and people don't want to associate with you after, or there are consequences to pay from it, and you are free to do the action, but you have to deal with the consequences. I see the same arguments with censorship, where Republicans will pretend that, oh, we're against censorship and anyone that censors anything is evil. There should be no censorship at all, when everyone agrees with some level of censorship, right? Everyone would say that child pornography should be censored. Gory images should be censored, things of this nature. But then they want to vilify businesses that censor, say, hate speech. Though if you ask them if businesses should be able to ban gay people, they'll be the first ones to say, yeah, businesses can make their own decisions. And it all comes down to them trying to feed into their victim narrative. But I also love how quick Don Lemon goes in at the end and shuts down her free speech rants and saying, oh, it'll end with books just being banned and words just being banned and all of these things, by just simply pointing out that Republicans are the only ones trying to ban books and literature. That doesn't sound much like free speech to me. It's almost like they too believe that there are limits as to what should be allowed. That's kind of odd.
There's a difference between something that happens to people naturally, right? We all get older. I have trouble sometimes recalling things that, like, I'm like, oh, what's that senator again? What's that name again? And that happens to the best of us. But there is a difference between that and someone who is, a perpetual liar, or doesn't believe in democracy, or is an election denier. Those two things are not equal. And I think that is the premise of what Democrats are operating on right now. Joe Biden may not be the man he was 5 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but he's still better than the alternative.
Yeah, obviously I fundamentally disagree with your assessment, and I think it's very strange coming from a party where Hillary Clinton denied the election results for years. And said that her election was stolen from her. It's very weird for people to suddenly just not remember that.
This kind of goes into the stuff that we covered earlier today. So to work backwards, Hillary never denied the election results. She conceded publicly and privately. She launched 0 court cases to challenge the outcome. She also didn't then choose fake electors not certified by the state, but signed on like they were. That is textbook fraud, by the way, fraudulent electors, to try and pressure Mike Pence to overturn the election. Or I guess at that time it would have been Joe Biden, right? Comparing her being upset about Russian interference and publicly stating that there was Russian interference when there was, is comparing that with Trump's literal attempt to overthrow his election and then the constant denial of losing after his attempt failed is laughable at best, pathetic at worst. One is at most someone being a sore loser, but being a sore loser by pointing out things that actually happened. The other is just general corruption, and then in return trying to attack the credibility of institutions to get his supporters to continue to rally behind him because he can't take any accountability. Put it like this: 60 court cases to 0. Instant concession to fake elector scheme. These things are not comparable. It's like apples to oranges. And also, Hillary isn't running for office again, and Donald Trump is. So when we talk about the threat of someone who tried to deny an election getting back into office, what's the point of bringing up Hillary, who will never get into office, other than to just conflate and distract from your own candidate, right? And Don also makes a really good point here in that Biden said it best, right? Don't compare him to the almighty, compare Biden to the alternative. And for me personally, and those on the left, I would take the guy who's losing a step, who stutters, occasionally doesn't finish his sentences or project the best, over the guy who lies almost every time he speaks, tried to overthrow our democracy, and does even worse delusional things when he speaks, like claiming that George Washington won the revolution by controlling the airports in 1776, or saying that he beat Obama over 8 times, or confusing Nancy Pelosi with Nikki Haley. But it's a curve that right-wingers want to grade Trump on that they would never grade Biden on, especially when Biden then supports the core fundamental issues I do, like climate change, women's reproductive rights, Medicare, public education. It's no comparison.
In your rhetoric, you're saying that it's a mental disorder.
It is a mental disorder. That's what I learned
disorder.
in school.
It's not
It
a
is
mental disorder. Okay,
if you think that you're a boy and you're actually a girl, you are suffering from a mental disorder, obviously, because you can't actually change your sex, obviously.
I know plenty of children now. I know plenty
you can play dress up, but you can't change your sex.
I know plenty of young people and old people who are trans, right? And they are not pretending. And it is not a mental disorder.
Well, it is pretending, because you will literally never be able, if you are a little boy, to grow up and have a baby, because you're not a little girl.
A couple points to end on with this one, because the transphobia is something that also really irks me. To her, if giving birth is the bar to if someone is a woman, that doesn't really make sense, because what about the little girls who grow up and just can't give birth naturally? Are they not really little girls also? Using one standard to disqualify but not the same standard to qualify makes no sense. That's logically inconsistent. But also, if we did grant her that it's a mental disorder, wouldn't the answer be to allow healthcare to treat the disorder? And all data on the matter shows better outcomes when it's treated with gender affirming care. That's like someone having a sickness and it's like, all data shows that this medicine will cure it. But then you're just like, no, but let's just like punch them in the head and see if that works, and tell them that they're worthless, and that'll make them get better. These are just the kind of logic trains that Candace and right-wingers go on, thinking that they're making good arguments, but they're really easy to just poke holes in. In reality, gender is a social construct, and it's also of sociology. Sociology is a science that is always changing, as society is always changing. Sociology is the science of society. Defining what is a woman is as complex as defining what is a chair, which might sound simple, but if you're using textbook definitions only, they're equally impossible. I've given this rant before, but to give kind of a more condensed version to end on, the definition of a chair is a separate seat for one person, typically with a back and 4 legs, but not always. Given that definition, anything that one person is sitting on alone could be a chair. The ground, a table, a dog, a car, a person. But if you were to claim that these things were chairs, people would look at you crazy, because in reality, words are social constructs themselves are socially defined. And to try to take that away from words would be to murder language. A word is defined when you can point to it in society and say, that's what this is. This is how we know the difference between a chair and a table, a chair and a person, a chair and a dog. And over time, what a chair is has changed. Now, sometimes they have 8 legs, sometimes they have 3, some have back, some don't, some are big, some are small, some have wheels, etc. And the same can be said for a woman. What a woman is in society is always changing and will always be changing, but the idea of gender identity gets into the atmosphere of the roles, perception, and judgment that you as a person would like to open yourself up to, when in society, a man will always be looked at as different or weird or whatever for carrying a purse, but a woman will not. A man might be considered weak or feeble for not being the breadwinner and working the most in his family, but a woman generally is not. But it's hard to get this across to a group of people who are so dense that they don't even understand the difference in biology and sociology, sex and gender, and are stuck in the 1950s kind of way of thinking that these things have to be intertwined, like race and ethnicity.